Continuing with How the Great Religions Began by Joseph Gaer, Book 3, The Advance of the One God. Part 3, Christianity, Star of the Purple East. Now, I'm not quite sure why they call it that, but they had to pick a color, right? Or, well, they didn't, but they thought that'd be neater to do, maybe. The meeting of Jesus and John. The time that Jesus went up to Jerusalem at his 12th year, until he was nearly 30 years old, we know little of his life. All we know is that his father died, and that Mary, his mother, moved with her family from Nazareth to Cana, her birthplace. Then Jesus followed the trade he had learned from his father, carpentry, and helped support his mother and his younger sisters and brothers. There was no such consensus, as they say. All week long, Jesus worked with hammer and plane in his little shop in the village of Cana. Cana? I don't know. C-A-N-A. And on Sabbaths, he went to the synagogue for prayer, a discussion of the holy law. Often he rose before the worshippers to explain the law. I wouldn't know about that. Such as was the custom in those days in Palestine. They who felt so moved arose before the congregation to interpret and explain whatever part of the law they had given thought to. But the interpretation of Jesus was unlike the interpretation of others. His words were simple and appealed to the hearts of his listeners. Many in the synagogue became his admirers, and they called him Rabbinu, meaning our teacher. And many of them began to discuss the teachings of the young carpenter of Canaan. So Lord, more likely, would be Rabbinu. Teachings. And many of them began to discuss the teachings of the young carpenter of Cana. About this time, stories were being told about a young man named John, the son of one Zacharias and his wife Elizabeth, who came from Judea to the banks of the Jordan to announce the gospel, which means the good tidings. The good tidings of Palestine, then, was the prophecy that the Messiah was soon to appear. A large number of followers had gathered about John near Bethabara on the Jordan. It was reported, and there John immersed them in the water of the river to sanctify them before preaching to them about the coming of the Messiah. For centuries, people all over Asia believe that there is a mystic power in flowing water. In India, as we have seen, people go to the Ganges to bathe in it, believing that the water of the sacred river can wash their sins away. Well, God doesn't want just belief. He wants some sort of physical action to happen with us too. Some of the Jews in the days of Jesus also believed that immersion in flowing water cleansed the people of their sins. John too believed in that, and he baptized people in the Jordan before he preached to them. That was why he was called John the Baptist. Actually, he's a poor man living on insects and sprouts and whatnot out in the desert, but, well, out in the wilderness, like it. Though John preached in Judea in the south, his fame traveled down to Galilee in the north and reached Cana. Jesus left his shop and went south to meet the Baptist, who, Mary said, was his third cousin. On the banks of the Jordan, not far from Jericho, Jesus met Yaricho. Isn't that the Hebrew of it? because there's no j sound in Hebrew. Jesus met a large number of men surrounding one, wearing a coat of camel's hair, tied with a cord about his loins, addressing them with fiery words. Esaus was not Isus was not a version of Joshua, by the way. His name is an egregor. Well, it's the egregor that includes the the Messiah / prophet, and Barnabas and Barabbas, and and Apollonius, meaning "oh thou," "oh you." It's a strong form of the term, anyways. Jesus met a large number of men surrounding one, wearing a coat of camel's hair, tied with a cord about his loins, who addressed them with fiery words. Though he was only a young man of about 30 years, his beard was long, his hair neglected. From his appearance and his words, Jesus knew that must be the Baptist of whom he had heard. Baptist means different now. The Baptist sect of Christianity, people tend to be guided by their own thoughts and feelings and treat it like God, right? Or at least their leader does, and the congregation follows it. Oh, his thoughts and feelings must be thoughts and feelings that God wanted him to have. Okay. And they would rebaptized, or consider themselves rebaptized by the water, the fire, the Spirit, whatever. These are required. Even if they were Christian before, member of a different church, there's a reconfirmation of some type. That's what makes the Baptist sect. I was a type of Baptist, but I was never a full member of any other church. Jesus neared and heard John say, "There cometh one mightier than I after me, the latchet of whose shoes I am not worthy to stoop down to unloose." At the end of the sermon, Jesus went up to John and asked to be baptized. But the discerning eye of the prophet saw at once that Jesus was no ordinary follower. John hesitated. "I have need to be baptized by you, and you come to me." But Jesus insisted, and John baptized him. The meeting of Jesus with John in the 30th year of his life marked the beginning of his prophetic career, a career which was to last only 3 years, 3 eventful years, rapidly moving to the sorrowful end. Well, if it was what was supposed to happen, why are we sad about it? Section 5. The Sermon on the Mount. For years, Jesus had read and heard about the coming of the Messiah. In all the books and all the whispered stories, the Redeemer seemed only a dream of the sorrowful. But from the lips of John came the near announcement that the coming of the Redeemer was nigh. There was no doubt in John's heart, no question in John's utterances. The coming of the Messiah soon, quite soon, was as certain as the coming of the dawn when the night had passed. Jesus left John and went away into the desert of Judea to think about the Messiah John had prophesied. 40 days he remained in the vast loneliness of the desert, in prayer and meditation. From the desert Jesus returned home, his thoughts on the brotherhood of man, and in a world of all justice and peace. But he did not remain long in Galilee, for the Passover was approaching, the time for an annual pilgrimage to Jerusalem. Jesus went down to the holy city for the yearly feast. Still wrapped up in the thoughts of the kingdom of heaven, he arrived in the court of the temple, and there before him once more was the sight of oxen and bound sheep, eager merchants and dealers in doves, niggardly money changers squatting before their little tables laden with coins, and the pilgrims come to glorify Jehovah, moving about and haggling with the dealers. Jesus looked up at the temple, in which rested the Holy of Holies, then turned his eyes again to the marketplace. A great resentment rose within him for this irreverence towards the house of God. He picked up a whip that one of the cattle dealers had dropped, and drove the cattle out of the court, overturning the tables of money changers, spreading the rolling coins over the pebbled yard. And above the noise of the startled merchants, the voice of Jesus rose. "Take these things hence. Make not God's house a marketplace." Remember, Barabbas stormed the temple with 2 people and was killed for it. Nothing Jesus could have done would have brought him more to the wrathful attention of the priest and the religious leaders of Jerusalem, for they had tolerated the merchants in the inner court of the temple. By driving out the merchants and the money changers, Jesus had defied the authority of the priest. Through this act, Jesus aroused many enemies. But they were few compared with the friends and followers who flocked to the man who dared defy the authorities in Jerusalem and admonish those who desecrated the holy temple. At the end of the Passover, Jesus returned to Galilee. And preached in Nazareth and Cana about the religion that ought to spring from the heart. A Nabi, as he would have been called, is somebody who awakens the inner teachings. Yes, a messenger of God, also a exemplar prophet. The people who had known Jesus from his childhood tried to make light of his teachings. "Is not this Jesus the carpenter's son?" they said to each other. Well, hand laborer, anyways. Carpentry could have been part of that. But a expert carpenter would have been higher status than a mere hand laborer, as the Greek shows, of what he was called. "Yes, this is the son of Mary," the people replied. "You know his brothers and sisters, don't you? What makes him so wise, then?" they mocked. Jesus, who heard them, said, "A prophet is not without honor, save in his own country and in his own house." He left for Capernaum, a little village on the shores of Lake Galilee, and there lived with 2 brothers named Peter and Andrew, humble fishermen, who believed that Jesus was the expected Messiah. Remember, the Peter in the Pauline movement is a different Peter. Sman Magian. Very often Jesus went out to the lakeshore with the fishermen gathered to mend their nets, and he preached to them there. Slowly the fame of Jesus grew in Capernaum, and slowly it was carried beyond Capernaum to all the neighboring villages and towns. Marvelous tales began to be told about the carpenter of Nazareth. These tales traveled south to the end of the kingdom, and people from near and far came to the little fisherman's village to see and hear the man about whom so many wonderful tales were told. Once a great the crowds were a lot smaller than people realized. He had a very small following at his death, and the Essene teacher of wickedness, as it was called, or teacher of righteousness, that sort of. Anyways, once a great multitude had gathered. Well, I mean, that was his name for him. He wasn't a teacher of wickedness. He was just opening things up to the people. Once a great multitude had gathered on one of the hills near Capernaum to hear Jesus preach. He rose before them and preached to them the sermon that has since been known as the Sermon on the Mount. In that sermon, he gave them the most important of his teachings and showed them in which way his teachings differed from the teachings of the priests and rabbis who had come before him. In that memorable sermon, Jesus said, well, there's a couple different versions of it, right? So people decided later what he said, so it could have been some of the stuff, at least from one of the characters. But blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. You should be rich in spirit. Humility, yes, poor in spirit's probably the wrong way to phrase it. For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Well, in the afterlife, obviously. meekness. It's okay, shyness, but you want to be bold and strong and all that too, if that's what you're given the ability to do. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Well, that doesn't mean they are children of God. Think not that I come to destroy the law or the prophets. I have not come to destroy them, but to fulfill. Ye have heard that it was said by them of old time, Thou shalt not kill, and whoever shall kill shall be in danger of the judgment. But I say unto you that whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. Ye who have heard that it hath been said, An eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you that ye resist not evil. But whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other side also. Ye have heard that it hath been said, Thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, and do good to those that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he maketh the sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. Figure of speech, a real prophet wouldn't use this children of God talk. But in the so-called New Testament, we also have the reference of the hating your own family. So we're looking at a different person versus whoever came up with that. For if ye forgive men their trespasses, your heavenly Father, well, your heavenly provider, Eloheinu, probably, will also forgive you. But if you forgive not men their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses. Yeah, your provider. Judge not, that ye be not judged. For with whatever judgment ye judge, ye shall be judged, and with whatever measure ye meet, it shall be measured to you again. Now, judgment's an automatic thing, so the carefulness is, you gotta judge in a way that you would like to be judged. Ask, and it shall be given to you. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened to you. For everyone that asketh receiveth, and he that seeketh findeth, and to him that knocketh it shall be opened. Therefore all things, whatever ye would that men should do to you, do ye even so to them. For this is the law and the prophets. So, even so, every good tree bringeth forth good fruit, but a corrupt tree bringeth forth evil fruit. A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit, neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. Therefore, whosoever heareth these sayings of mine, and doeth them, I will liken him unto a wise man, which buildeth his house upon a rock. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and beat upon that house, and it fell not, for it was founded upon a rock. In the Sermon on the Mount, and in most of his sermons and parables after that, Jesus emphasized the difference between his teachings and the teachings of Judaism. Judaism taught law, Jesus taught love. And this is interpretation that doesn't match the New Testament. It says in the Bible that Jesus came not to do away with any amount of the law, not even a mark, but to fulfill it, to restore it. So he's not changing anything. Nothing that he did was to do that. Kosherod, the actual kosherod. Not the kosher, the kosherod. Section 6. None greater than these. From among his followers and disciples, Jesus chose 12, whom he called his apostles, and these he sent out to announce the coming of the Messiah. The apostles went through Galilee, preaching to the people of the coming of the Redeemer of mankind, as foretold by the prophets. And in whispers they said that Jesus of Nazareth was he who cometh. They were still expecting more prophets at that point, obviously, and after Jesus, that's part of the message that the Bible even includes. They were expecting others. Great multitudes of believers, as well as crowds who were curious, came to Capernaum. seeking Jesus and asking to be healed by him, for it had been told everywhere that Jesus was a great healer. Wherever Jesus went, great multitudes followed him. Well, at least someone did. And often he did not even have time to eat. At this time, John the Baptist, who had made strong utterances against the corruption of King Herod Antipas, son of King Herod the Great, was put to death. The sad news of John's death reached Jesus in Capernaum. And is it Hussein who was killed, the grandson of Prophet Muhammad ibn Abdullah, and his head put on a platter by one of the Muawiyah leaders? The first meeting of Jesus with John was the starting point in the career of Jesus. The news of John's death was the turning point in the career of Jesus. In his life, as in his death, John the Baptist influenced his third cousin in Galilee. John had paid with his life for preaching in Judea, but in his death, John had taught that the best fighting ground is the enemy's camp. And Jesus decided to go up to Judea, even to Jerusalem, and spread his teachings there. And in the New Testament, it has Jesus say the same thing you have a prophet rather than a God say. I don't speak my own doctrine. I'm here to be an apostle, to say the words of whom sent me. Jesus knew the danger. Yet he went up to Jerusalem, to Bethany near Jerusalem, to spread his teachings. As soon as his presence in Jerusalem became known to the priest, they began to plot against Jesus. The greatest enemies of Jesus were the religious leaders of that day in Jerusalem, who were called Pharisees. These Pharisees wanted their people to go back to the old religion as taught before the Jewish exile to Babylon. They did not believe in heaven and hell. They did not believe in life after death. They opposed any teachings that were contrary to the Mosaic law or to the teachings of the earlier prophets. Jesus' utterances against the Mosaic law, as in the Sermon on the Mount and afterwards, angered the Pharisees. But in those days, in Jerusalem, no man could be forbidden from preaching whatever he pleased, unless he preached against the Roman government that ruled Palestine, or unless he was guilty of mocking God. If they could find Jesus guilty of either treason or blasphemy, there's a difference between different belief and blasphemy. The Pharisees thought that it would be easy to stop him from spreading his teachings. They came to him and asked him many questions in the hope that Jesus would commit himself against the rulers of the land. But when they failed in that, they tried to get him to commit himself as a blasphemer. One Pharisee asked, "Which is the first commandment of all?" To which Jesus replied, "The first commandment is, 'Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one God.' And the second is, 'Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself.' There is none other commandment greater than these."